Welcome to TechNOW. I'm your host, John Reid, CEO of CATA Alliance. And from Nova Scotia, we have Brandon Kolybaba, the CEO of CloudA. And Brandon, I read your blog, How Cloud in Canada is Like the CPR in 1871. You got my attention because we're working very hard on encouraging cloud adoption. Tell us a bit about that blog.
Thanks, John. Well, it's getting a little bit of a good reception. I guess it's just an interesting idea to try and compare, the sort of monumental change that we're trying to accomplish, and compare that to what happened 100 or so years ago when they really looked at, the infrastructure of the nation at that point, investing in that infrastructure for the future benefit of the nation, if you will. And I think we're at a similar point now where we're at the era of the internet and the cloud, if you will. And we have to invest in that infrastructure from my perspective, and there's a parallel there.
So I hope we don't have to wait 100 years. I mean, I understand the leap that was made 100 years ago with the CPR, but what's the leap that you want to see happen today?
Sure. I think that the biggest change is just, cloud is a confusing term, and there's just a lot of, misdirection about what's going on. So, there's a real difference in my mind, knowing a little bit about the technology, between virtualization technology and true cloud technology. So, a lot of folks are stuck in the virtualization model, and really to get benefit out of utility cloud computing, where you're doing things like on-demand usage of those utilities, scaling up and down as you need it, paying for it as you need it, so the utility model. That's a new paradigm, and I think it's struggling to get adoption in Canada.
Well, we're seeing, we're doing a campaign, Made to Must, Cloud Computing for Canada. We're doing that because there's resistance. Why do you suppose there's resistance in the federal government that really should be a leader in new technologies, be a role model? Have you got any sense of why we're hitting that obstacle?
Sure. I think they don't understand it. I think that it's confusing. The terminology is confusing. Everybody says cloud for almost everything these days, so that's a barrier. But in general, I mean, I think it's the real problem is you've got this big investment that's been made in this earlier iteration of technology, the virtualization iteration. So there's a whole bunch of organizations that are lobbying to, no, we don't want to adopt this disruptive new technology. We have to make our investment back on the technology we've already invested in. So there's a lack of interest in being innovative, I would say.
So back in 1871, we certainly had political leadership that made it happen for the nation. Do you think we're missing that, or do you think we need more people as political champions? Like, what do you see in terms of our leadership formula in Canada? Does it have to be beefed up a bit?
I would love for that to happen. I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but yeah, if some folks within the organization were to step up and take that, I think some have tried a little bit, but there's some very powerful influences that prevent that change from occurring, I think, and that's a world I don't really understand that well, to be honest.
Well, we try to understand it. We try to move it. Now, I would disagree. I think you are a leader. I know that you created and were recognized for a fastest growing company. I believe that was your SheepDog. Now, you have to lead innovation. So you've grown some companies pretty quickly, and I know now with CloudA, you've got that as your big mission. So why don't you close TechNOW? Like, what's the formula here? How do you get these things to sort of rock and roll and be recognized as a fast growth company? Can you share with us some of your insight?
I'll do my best. I think I do have an ability to foresee what technologies are likely to emerge as being, the next wave of change. And I think I predicted that with cloud very early on, like 7 years ago with SheepDog. We identified that software as a service technologies were going to change how people did business, and to some degree that's taken place. I now think that OpenStack is very much starting to get a lot of traction. We started investing in that 2 years ago. And I think you're going to see that will be a very significant change. So
Yeah.
how can I don't know if I can speak to that more, but I can predict what's going to happen. I can't really always help people understand exactly why they should be paying attention to it.
So if you had to give one piece of advice to a new entrepreneur, what would it be? I mean, you've been through a number of startups. I know you work with some of the young leaders in Nova Scotia to help them advance their interests. What one piece of business advice could you share with us?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it's a lot harder than you would anticipate, and I hear that a lot from young entrepreneurs that are thinking about getting into, starting their own businesses, and it's hard work. So anybody that doesn't have that sort of ambition, there are easier opportunities out there, but if you're prepared to put in 60, 70, 80 hours a week consistently, and as you go through the troughs of disillusionment, come out of them and still be able to be successful, I think that's what you need to have.
Well, I think that's great advice. It's a bit of a litmus test. You have to be very real. Do I have the fire in the belly?
Yeah.
Because it's a difficult road to create something new, and it's also a difficult road convincing people, the buyers, that they should adopt new solutions and maybe change old ways of doing things. So, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us from Nova Scotia, and thank you for being a successful entrepreneur and a role model.
Thanks, John.